Hello. Welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined this week by my Q&A friend, James Schiano. James, how you doing, man?
Wonderful. Q&A friend. I think we're friends otherwise besides the Q&A, no?
Yeah, I mean, there's one more Mets-Red Sox. Oh, no, the Mets-Red Sox series is done. So, yes.
No, one more game.
Oh, right. Today's Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, James? Labor Day weekend, daycare hasn't opened yet. My son's been home for what feels like an eternity, and I don't know what the days are anymore. But yeah, that makes sense. So one more day. Tomorrow we can be friends again.
There you go. Perfect. Those are long list problems I don't have.
A sweep right now that would basically all but end the Red Sox postseason hopes would just be real sad.
Yeah, there was a report from I think some of the Mets beat writers yesterday that the Red Sox didn't even leave the clubhouse for like a half hour after the game, 45 minutes. They said Devers sat with his jersey on, with the bat in his hand for about 20 minutes after the game, just staring forward blankly. That was a tough few games for the Red Sox and a tough month in general.
And look, I mean, I know, we're going to get into some teams that are struggling, and also some teams that are making some curious decisions. The Red Sox thing, it's like, look, they probably weren't a playoff team. They made some moves at the deadline to shore up the bullpen. Those guys didn't pitch great and wound up on the IL. Like, there's not a lot you could do about it. In the loss to the Mets yesterday, it's like Kutter Crawford pitched pretty well.
Amazing.
He did what he does and allowed a home run that happened to be a big home run to Lindor. And then Chris Martin, who was one of their best relievers, got lit up. So it's like, I don't know what else, they were always going to go to Chris Martin in situations like that. He's been pitching great. The lineup is healthy. I mean, you've got O'Neill back and Casas back and Devers is in there. And, I know Story's still hurt, whatever. I mean, they're not producing. But you know what? They have 4 prospects in the newly revamped MLB pipeline. 4 in the top 26 overall prospects are all Red Sox guys. They're all at AAA. So they might be up next year. And so it'll be interesting to see what the AL East is like next year. So what James and I are going to do, we're obviously going to run down a little bit of news and notes at the top. And then we're going to try to go just right into some schedule-based stuff. We did this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but the decisions you're making in your fantasy leagues right now really have to be like schedule over all else. You got to attack pitching staffs that are pitching really poorly right now, picking up hitters, even if you're streaming hitters for a week at a time. Those are decisions you have to make. And you have to cut pitchers, even if they're like 80% rostered. If you're looking at their schedule and you're like, I don't want to use them in their next 2 starts. Okay, they probably don't have a spot on your roster. You don't have 2 weeks to keep a guy on your bench right now. Mm-hmm. If you are trying to win a league, and maybe you have 1, right? Maybe if you're in an NFBC format, we don't have IL stashes there. So maybe you are thinking, I'm going to use this guy. I'm Glass now. I'm keeping him because when he comes back, I'm going to use him. Cool. Then that's your bench spot for, I might not use this guy this week or next week, but you can't load up your rosters with guys you don't think you're going to use because you're scared of what's going to happen if you put them on the waiver wire. We can't play that way anymore.
No, you can't. And it makes it a hard decision. It kind of gives you probably a little bit of a stomach ache when you have to look at some guys on your roster. You expected to be there through the thick and thin, but if you weren't going to start them, why are they on your team right now?
Yeah, exactly. You got to be ruthless right now. So we will get to that, but I just wanted to cover a couple of quick, real world baseball things before we dove into the news and notes. Obviously, the clip has gone viral of the White Sox players running into each other in left field yesterday. The White Sox are currently sitting at 31 and 109. But listen, they're within 50 games of first place. They are 49 and a half games out of the division. But is this the worst baseball team you can remember watching?
For me, as someone who's under 30 years old, yes, this is the worst baseball team I can remember watching. I barely remember that 2003 Tigers team. And then besides that, it's just a mess of those early Nationals teams and some of the bad Marlins teams here and there. But this White Sox team, it's comically bad. Kevin Brown summed it up. The White Sox go full White Sox. Also, while Alex Fast, shout out Alex Fast on the color broadcast, was trying to compare Stuff versus Command as one of the big one that was going to become one of the most classic baseball follies that we remember happened live. So shout out Alex for sticking to the analysis there. But This team's horrible. And I've made a full heel turn in every fantasy league over the last month, 6 weeks, to be like, I am going to do anything I can to get anybody in my lineup who's facing off with this team. Last week, Tyler McGill with the Mets. Tyler McGill has been bad for years, basically now. Got a win, 7 strikeouts in 5 1/3 innings, 1 run. Last night, Cade Povich, who's been horrible this year. 7 1/3 innings, 10 strikeouts, win against the White Sox. It's just every single opportunity you have to play a guy against the team, you have to.
We posted a blurb on our site last night. I don't know who was covering the White Sox game, but that Luis Roberts OPS is either already or dangerously close to being lower than Andrew Benintendi's OPS this year, which is it's disgusting. I don't know how that's the case. It's wild. We don't need to talk about the White Sox anymore, except for here's my question. Even though my back hurts from just hearing that you said you're under 30, we're just going to roll with it. We're going to keep going. The 2018 Orioles lost 115 games. The White Sox are already at 109. We think the White Sox are going to lose more than 115 games this year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then the next one in the not the modern era, but the era of those of us who are recording, and, I'm sure some people saw the 1962 Mets, even though you might not want to talk about that. But the 2003 Tigers lost 119 games. Okay. The White Sox have played exactly 140 games. So the White Sox have 22 games left. They need to lose 120 to top the Tigers. Can the White Sox, or will the White Sox, lose 11 of their next 22 games?
I think there's a good chance. I think the only thing that could stop them, and we'll get to this soon, is I think there's 6 or 7 against the Angels in there. So that's going to be a real test of will for both of those rosters. But it's as bad as it's ever been. It's funny you brought up the Mets, because that was a hot topic this weekend, because the Mets played the White Sox, and there was this major age war between Mets fans, old and young, about whether or not they wanted that record to fall. And I know Howie Rose, the Mets radio voice of the Mets, my dad was telling me he doesn't want to see you go down, because I think Mets fans have some weird pride in the fact that they spun around and won the World Series 7 years later, where this White Sox team looks far away. And that's also why I think that Orioles team doesn't feel as bad now in 2018, because it took them 4 years to become a very competitive team again. So I think that
4 years from now, the White Sox are going to be World Series contenders. Is what you're saying?
That's the difference. I think 5 years from now, this White Sox team looks like there's very little hope to even compete for a 500 record. I mean, maybe
3 years ago, we thought they might compete. And the record James is talking about, the record for most losses ever. It's not by percentage, right? Because obviously, like the 1916 Philadelphia Athletics have the worst winning percentage. They lost 117 games, but they played fewer games overall, etc. The Mets, the 1962 Mets, have lost the most losses in Major League Baseball history at 120. So again, that the White Sox are at 109. So if the White Sox lose 11 of their next 22 games, basically if the White Sox still manage to play 500 baseball the rest of the way, they will tie for the most losses in baseball history. I think we feel pretty confident in saying that the White Sox are going to break that record. And I'm looking back on our betting show at the beginning of the year when we knew the White Sox were going to be bad, and I don't know if many of us took their under on their win totals, and we should have, because it's coming in way under that. A good team that's making curious decisions right now. I want to talk to you as a New Yorker about the Yankees. Clay Holmes blew a save yesterday. John Boy and a bunch of the people that work with the Yankee media have basically said they keep losing the same way over and over and over again, and then just call it bad luck, I believe is what the tweet said. A lot of my Yankee fan friends say the same thing. The managers, the organization, they don't learn. We keep doing the same things over and over again. What are first of all, should fantasy managers be worried about Clay Holmes? But also, should we be concerned about what the Yankees are doing? They're continuing to play Alex Verdugo and Trent Grisham over calling up Jason Dominguez. Are we ever going to see Jason Dominguez? Is Clay Holmes just going to keep running out there? What can we make sense of what's happening right now?
The Clay Holmes thing is weird because from a fantasy perspective, the 11 blown saves are egregious. It's ridiculous, because if you add even half of those to his save total, you're like, wow, nice. Clay Holmes, another 35 save season with a month to play. This is another fantastic season. And then you look at his ratios, and they're not even bad. The whip is bad, because, the whip will kind of always be bad because as a sinker baller, he's going to give up a lot of balls in play. But 3.27 ERA with 11 blown saves. In it doesn't make sense, which is why the Yankee fans can keep going back to this narrative of unlucky, unlucky, unlucky. Even his home run rate isn't really tremendously high. Nothing is really that. His BABIP is high, but not even that crazy compared to like what it could be in terms of like a standard deviation. But it is peculiar that the Yankees keep going back to him, and I think it comes back to the Yankees have a strange bullpen alignment year after year because the Yankees just love sinkers, curveballs, and changeups and sliders for some reason. They seem like they don't like pitchers who really throw very many four-seam fastballs. So while they have a good bullpen statistically, they don't have a lot of these flamethrowers that get a lot of swings and misses that you want in the ninth inning when you don't want balls in play because you want these games to end as quickly as possible. Because like the Jake Cousins resurgence has been fun. Do you want him to close games over Clay Holmes right now? Right. Luke Weaver as well. Tommy Kahnle. Those are three pitchers that weren't in baseball basically for the last year and a half, and they're the Yankees' primary setup men right now. I don't know if any of them you still trust in a vacuum over Clay Holmes, but Clay Holmes seems so broken mentally, you might have to give one of those guys a chance, and that could give an opportunity of fantasy baseball down the stretch.
Yeah. Michael Tonkin, who they released, who the Mets also released, was pitching pretty well for the Yankees, but gone. And yeah, as you mentioned, if I go to the game leverage index on Fangraphs from August 1st on, the game leverage index tells me the leverage index, so like how pressure packed the situation was essentially when the pitcher entered the game. Behind Holmes, it is Tommy Kahnle, Jake Cousins, Mark Leiter. So yeah, maybe that's why they keep doing it. Cousins was interesting in Milwaukee at times. Last year, not so much, but that was an abbreviated season. There were some high strikeout rate, low ERA years back in 2021, 2022 when he was first coming up. So maybe there's a shot there. But yeah, the Yankees love veterans. They're going to keep running Verdugo out.
It's horrible.
They're going to keep their Rizzo's back in the lineup. I guess we're done with LeMahieu, but who knows?
Hopefully.
John Birdie's coming back. That's good. He's also a veteran, so he might get on the field for them. They'll probably just play him against lefties in left field instead of Verdugo. So who knows, man? It is an interesting situation there in New York, and frustrating for fantasy managers because I don't think we can rely on the Jason Dominguez September call-up that most people were hoping for at this point.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Bad news out of Chicago, even though they're telling us it's good news. Because Justin Steele was scratched from his start with elbow inflammation. The good news on the MRI was that it's elbow inflammation. I guess that's good news because they're saying there's no immediate tear. However, for fantasy purposes, is that good news? I mean, elbow inflammation from Justin Steele would seem to imply an IL stint. We only have 4 months to go. 4 weeks. If we had 4 months, oh my God, RJ, I would be banging my head against the wall right now. We only have 4 weeks to go in the baseball season. If Justin Steele lands on the IL and you are in a league without IL spots, is it time to cut?
You kind of have to. He said he expects to pitch again this season, but I'm sure a situation like this where you avoid the structural damage, it depends a lot on where the Cubs wind up in the playoff picture. And they have been surging of late. I think they're now 3 or 2.5 games behind the Braves with the last wild card spot, and either a game or two behind the Mets for the team that's just barely on the outside looking in. But if they fall out and you get to 10 games left and you're 5 out, does Justin Steele make that start? Maybe you get one start, 1 4 or 5 inning start from Justin Steele. So to me, it's almost a guaranteed drop, which sucks because Steele has been fantastic again, but it's just not someone you can really hang on to right now.
Yeah, they're 4 behind the Mets, which means 4.5 behind the Braves at this point. And so, to your point, like if you're not, and they've been playing well, but if you're not closing that gap in a week, right? If you're still 4 out, 5 out with like 14 to play, that's tough to push, your ace back if he's not fully 100% healthy. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Speaking of aces returning, we're going to get Jacob deGrom. Kennedy Landry reported on Twitter yesterday, I haven't seen any update since then, that the Rangers are talking to deGrom about just pitching this weekend for the Rangers, not doing another rehab start. There's no indication of how many innings that would be, whether that's going to be happening. Again, that was a report that she tweeted on Tuesday, and so we haven't had an update yet, but the deGrom return is imminent. It's hard to pick him up in fantasy leagues because he was rostered as soon as he started making rehab starts. But I'm just curious what are you expecting to see. I mean, like, we kind of thought about this with Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, when they were coming back. They're both hurt again, and may not pitch again this year. Are we going to see like some fun Jacob deGrom starts, or does it make you nervous?
It only makes me nervous as a baseball fan that wants to see Jacob deGrom do something in the twilight of his career, just so we can remember the great times that were had. But I think in terms of what he's going to be and what these appearances look like for the Rangers, I think it'll be very similar to what's been going on with Drew Rasmussen with Tampa Bay, where you're going to see Jacob deGrom throw 2 innings, 3 innings, max 45, 50 pitches. Just get on the mound, feel good, stretch that arm out, get the adrenaline down, get rid of the butterflies, and just something so we can have a regular offseason and believe next year something different will happen. But that, depending on the league you play in, there's probably a modicum of value in that. If you happen to be in a daily league, put him in the lineup that day, get your 5 strikeouts, get a couple innings of nice ratios. But it's hard to say I'm going to trust this in a real sense.
Yeah. And just if he were to come back again, we don't know when it's going to happen, but as of right now, RotoWire probable starters has Jacob deGrom for Seattle, Toronto, Oakland as the 3 games that he would get. So you would love to see that if you have Jacob deGrom on your team. Even if you're getting 3 or 4 innings against those teams, they're probably going to be really good. The downside of this is, you and I have been just really pounding the table for Cody Bradford as an ad.
Hard.
Adding deGrom into the rotation has reshuffled things. And again, this is projected by RotoWire, so don't make any drastic cuts right now. But we had, before the Jacob deGrom potential comeback, we had Cody Bradford set to, I'm scrolling down to where I wrote it down. We had Cody Bradford set to face the Angels, the Mariners, the Blue Jays, and the A's to finish his season. Now he's set to face the Angels and then get the Arizona Diamondbacks, and then Toronto, and then Oakland.
Yeah.
Getting the Arizona Diamondbacks is significantly worse than getting the Seattle Mariners, especially the way that the Diamondbacks are playing right now. It does kind of like temper some of our enthusiasm on Bradford. We'll see what happens. Obviously, you're hopefully loving the Angels start this weekend. And then you might have to, even the Blue Jays start isn't a lock, right? So if it's now Arizona and Toronto, he may not be a guy you hold. And we'll talk about that kind of stuff a little bit later in the segment. Mm-hmm. Also with the Rangers, we got this weird Bruce Bochy report that Corey Seager didn't play yesterday because they were managing his workload. But he also then said he's not at 100% right now, but who is at 100%? And we had an internal conversation, on Slack among the writers about how do we blurb this, right? Was the read that Bochy was saying just this outing was load management, or going forward was load management? I took him also mentioning that Seager was not 100% for him saying there will be some load management going forward. And so he'll miss some games here and there when they just want to give him a rest because they're not really in playoff contention and he's not healthy. Is that how you took it? And if you have Corey Seager in fantasy, there's not really much you can do, right? I mean, you have to kind of keep him in the lineup and just hope he's not missing more than 1 game a week.
Yeah, you can't do anything because it does 5 games of Corey Seager make a difference to you in terms of 6 games of the shortstop you're deciding between and utility guy you're deciding between. You just can't. You just hope that isn't something. But this is sadly a weird just part of the Corey Seager experience. There's always some cuts, some bruises, some nicks. And I feel like as long as he's playing shortstop, which I'm sure with that contract he will for a few more years going forward, you're probably just looking at someone when you're in your drafts next February and March that you have to anticipate 145 max games played. And then you just have to do your projections from there. No matter what the projection systems say to expect from Corey Seager, it's just a sad part of the reality. And now, because it creates these very annoying, awkward decisions this time of year. But you can't, if he's there, you can't change anything. You just have to keep rolling with it.
Yeah. Our recommendation on the blurb, my recommendation here, just make sure you have a backup shortstop on your roster, because if it gets to the point where they do say hey, Seager's going to miss this series and come back, you just want to have somebody ready to go on your roster in case we get something more definitive about what that load management means. Otherwise, you're just putting Seager in and hoping for the best. Today, Wednesday, we are going to see Yu Darvish pitch again for the Padres. The reports were that while Darvish was away tending to a personal matter, he was throwing, right? He was throwing 2 hitters. They were like local high school hitters or whatever in San Diego. So it wasn't like he was getting, at bats against MLB hitters. But in terms of his arm health, the expectation is that his arm health is close to what maybe it should be at this stage. What are your expectations of Yu Darvish? Because the landing spot, against Detroit is good. And then he gets Seattle, which we also like. And then he gets Houston, which isn't great, but then he gets the White Sox.
Yeah.
So like Detroit, Seattle, and the White Sox in 3 of his next 4 starts seems like a great stretch for Yu Darvish, but are we expecting him to be Yu Darvish?
I think that sometimes as analysts and as fans, we forget the human element of fantasy baseball and the fact that Darvish was struggling early in the year, and then it's turned out that he was tending to a family matter, and now he's been throwing, he's coming back. So I think there's any way that this could go. I think it's hard to be able to predict it. And as a Mets fan, I've been very keyed into the Padres and the Diamondbacks schedules as we end the year here, in terms also with the fantasy baseball in play. And that weird little landmine with the Astros, then they have the White Sox, and after that is the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. It's such a wait and see game with Darvish right now. It's hard to pretend that this is a Darvish we can rely on, because even without this almost basically lost season, we have to say now, Darvish is a guy who'd been a hopeful resurgence, trending down, getting older. Like a lot of things were happening with Darvish where I don't think this is like the same smash of Darvish that it would have been 2 years ago if he came back off this kind of layoff. So it's a certain wait and see. It's a probable for as long as everything goes okay today, even in the 1-start week in Seattle, that's probably a matchup you have to smash just because that's the time of year it is. But it's very wait and see with Darvish. I wouldn't let Darvish come back and expecting like a top 25, top 30 pitcher like we've come to expect from Darvish over the years.
Right. He is rostered in 69% of Yahoo leagues, so that means in 31% of leagues he is available. There was, that nature of like, nobody knew what his timeline was. So he was dropped in a lot of formats because also when he was put on the exempt list, he couldn't be held on the IL in any format. So a lot of people did drop him. So it's just worth checking your waiver wire just to see if Yu Darvish is out there. If you're in an NFBC format, obviously you'll have until this weekend so you can see what he does against Detroit, but that is a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Lastly, I just want to ask you, we got former top prospects called up as part of the expanded rosters. Jordan Walker is back again. He was back a little while ago. He got sent down, but then the Cardinals DFA'd Tommy Pham, who was one of their deadline acquisitions because whatever. So Jordan Walker has now started 5 straight games in right field. It seems like he's going to be the everyday right fielder. Coby Mayo came up when Ramon Urias was put on the IL. And so the expectation was that Coby Mayo was going to be the everyday third baseman. But instead, Emmanuel Rivera has started the last 2 games at third base, 3 in a row because he also started at first. So Mayo has made 1 start in the 3 games that he has come up. And then we also got Kyle Manzardo back up for the Guardians as part of the expanded rosters. He has DH'd 3 games in a row since coming up. All 3 have been against right-handed pitching. And so I think maybe the implication there is that he will DH against righties only. He's gone 5 for 11 in those 3 games with 2 home runs, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. So Manzardo, Walker, Mayo, are you interested in adding any of those 3 for like a strong September rebound from these former top prospects?
It's still probably the opposite of what I think about all 3 of these guys' full career dynasty wise, but I think in the near term right now, 1 month, Manzardo is my leader. I think he's the one who's going to get the most consistent playing time. I think he's the one, as we'll talk about later, with by far the easiest schedule. The fact that the Orioles seem to clearly not trust Coby Mayo in the field is really relevant. They just won't play him there. They refuse to, because Emmanuel Rivera it's a rare thing in baseball these days, but he's a pure glove first third baseman. You don't see that very often. Like he's on the field just for a glove. And I think Emmanuel Rivera, if I'm not mistaken, crushes left-handed pitching. I think that's the one thing. Yeah,
but he's been playing because he's been. I mean, to be fair, he's been hitting well over the last couple of days. So the Orioles might just be saying, "Let's see how many hits we can get out of you before we have to turn the page."
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're just keeping him in the lineup right now.
So it's out of that right now. And then we talked about in the Q&A yesterday, but the Guardians kind of need the spark right now. They need the bat. They need the power. Manzardo fits everything they need really well, as Josh Naylor is also dealing with injuries. So you could see time in first base. He's playing through it, but he is banged up at the knee. I can't remember if it's a knee or hip. I always forget. But it's really Manzardo. Like Walker, just until he does it, I don't know if he's going to do it. But and Mayo, you can't really bank on bad playing time right now, especially bad playing time for a right-handed hitter and the worst park for righties to hit in all of baseball. To me, it's Manzardo by a good length.
Yeah, I agree there. And then Walker for me over Mayo, just because Walker's playing every day. Walker had that huge game on Sunday night, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Where I'm pulling up the exact box score, but I think he had 5 hits. And that was like another one of those. Again, Jordan Walker's 22 years old. Like I think we sometimes maybe forget because he's been up and down. Yeah, he went 5 for 5 with a home run, 4 runs scored, 3 RBIs, and a steal. And then he's gone 0 for 4 with 0 for 8, with 4 strikeouts in the 2 games since then. But again, a little bit of an understanding of the potential he has, and if he's going to get everyday playing time, worth a look.
Yes.
A couple things to round out, real quick notes. You can jump in at the end. Let me know anything you want to add on to. Both Christian Walker and Xavier Edwards were activated from the IL.
And for
if they were dropped, and for Fernando Tatis, yes, that was earlier in the week. So if they were dropped in any leagues, make sure to add them. Ozzy Albiz has resumed fielding drills, and then they said he'll continue to kind of ramp up the return, but that he hopes to come back at the end of the year. Just keep an eye on it. I don't know if he was dropped in a lot of leagues. He's probably stashed on IL, but that's somebody that could be interesting for you. The Astros mentioned that Kyle Tucker did fracture his shin, which I'm sure shocks everybody here that it wasn't just a bruise.
Wow.
But no, they did say that like Kyle Tucker himself said there was a lot of inflammation immediately after, and so they couldn't see the fracture, but then they diagnosed the fracture. But it's been a fracture. That team has probably known it's been a fracture for weeks now. He's running more. I guess we'll maybe see him next week. I don't know at this point. We can't expect to, but it's supposed to be soon. Bo Bichette is running the bases today as he looks to come back from a hamstring injury, so we could get Bo Bichette back for the final weeks of the season. Yoshinobu Yamamoto started at AAA. He threw just a little over 2 innings, but he's working his way back. You'd expect that since the Dodgers want him in the postseason rotation, they might try to get him actually stretched out to at least 5 or 6 innings by the playoff time, right? Because they want him to go into the season playoff, able to throw a game. So he's not a guy I expect to come back and only pitch 3 or 4 innings. I think if he's back on the mound for the Dodgers, you're going to get 5-6 innings out of him. So keep an eye on that. Tyler Glasnow is throwing a bullpen later this week, and that will determine a little bit more about his timeline. Luis Heel will come back for the Yankees and start on Friday, and Clark Schmidt is going to come back for the Yankees and start on Saturday. And Garrett Cole fully expects to start on Sunday, despite the calf cramp that took him out of the game on Monday. So what that means is that as of right now, it seems like Nestor Cortez is going to get skipped in the rotation, and then they're going to go back to Cortez next week. He's lined up to face the Red Sox. So it's something to keep in mind for the Yankees. It looks like they're going to a 6th man to kind of manage the rotation heading into the postseason. Tyler Mahle and John Gray are both done for the year with injuries. And well, Mahle, it's just like he doesn't have enough time to get back. That has opened up the room for like deGrom and guys like that. And then just names that I wanted to highlight. Marco Luciano and Luis Matos for the Giants were called up. They had been fantasy relevant in the past, but the expectation from Giants beat writers is they are called up right now to be off the bench. So if you log into your fantasy leagues and see they're up, I don't believe it's a situation where they're up to get regular playing time. So they're probably best left on the wire for right now.
Yeah, Luciano did start at second base last night against a right-handed pitcher. So I think that is that's something. And Matos came in late for defense and center field. So those are guys that they still value somewhat in premium positions. Could get on the field.
Yes. All right. We're going to jump into our schedule, the schedule portion of our analysis, hopefully giving you tons and tons of names to consider rostering or cutting. But before we do that, week 1 of the NFL season is finally here. The season begins with NFL kickoff on Thursday, September 5th, as the Ravens face the Chiefs on NBC and Peacock. The following night, it's Packers versus Eagles in Brazil exclusively on Peacock. It's back-to-back games for us over here. Back-to-back great games. All four of these teams very likely to be playoff teams. So make sure you check that out. It'll be fun. It's fun to listen. It's fun to have baseball back in our lives. The U.S. Open also heating up right now. We are going to have the first American in a Grand Slam final since 2006. People, that's a long time. Since 2006, it's going to be either Francis Tiafoe or Taylor Fritz. They play each other on Friday night. So make sure you check that out. But yeah, good time for sports here. September is a pretty good month. So with the month of September that we're talking about, the idea is James and I are trying to look at hitters right now. We're going to start with hitters who have appealing or not appealing schedules really over the next couple of weeks. The idea here was to try to see if we could land on some hitters that you're not really streaming. So like not somebody you're picking up for like, they're going to Coors for 3 games and then you're going to drop them. Trying to look at guys who have schedules that are pretty appealing for the final, 2, 3, 4 weeks that you can hold for a while. Or some guys that have some bad schedules that you might need to drop. The first one I want to highlight is the Twins. We put this together. I looked at the fan graphs like ERA, Sierra, all that kind of stuff from August 1st on. So we're looking at over a month of production from the pitching staffs, which pitching staffs are really struggling right now. The Twins get a series against the Angels, a series against the Reds, a series against the Guardians that's not as good, but then a series in Fenway against a Red Sox rotation that's struggling, and in Fenway is an offensive-friendly environment. 3 of the next 4 series is starting next week. We're doing all this starting next week, but 3 of the next 4 series is for the Twins look really good. Who are some guys on the Twins? We're looking at guys like under 50% rostered, but who are some guys that you'd be interested in trying to add?
Also, after that Red Sox series for the Twins is the Marlins coming to town. So it's just more and more bad pitching. Yeah. You highlighted some names here I think are all worth talking about, and they are Brooksley, Matt Wallner, and Trevor Larnach. Some platoon guys on there, but this Twins lineup I think has underperformed a bit of late, and usually when a team that's pretty good underperforms, you can expect a slight overperformance as we keep moving on there, especially from a guy like Larnach and Wallner, who against righties are in the top of the batting order when they play. They have a few lefties coming up in the schedule. I see Tyler Anderson, but I think that is it for the immediate schedule for them in terms of left-handed opponent. So I think those are guys that next week, if you can see them on your waiver wire, get them in the lineup.
Yeah, and I will say that, it was only one. So like Matt Wallner sat last night against a lefty, but he played last Wednesday against a lefty. So, it's hard to know for sure, like if if that was a consistent trend where they're willing to play him slightly more against lefties than they are Larnach. But those are 2 guys, that we should mention. Brooks Lee coming back off the IL is interesting because he is somebody who we were really interested in picking up earlier on in the year before he got hurt. I'll just say like Matt Wallner has cooled off a little bit in August. He was kind of on like a really hot stretch after the All-Star break. He's cooled off a bit, but Trevor Larnach has really been crushing the ball, hitting 286 in 25 games in August with 4 home runs, 17 runs, 14 RBIs. Larnach is a guy I really hate saying it, but I think Larnach is the guy I'm most interested in if I see a stretch of like mainly righties here for the Twins.
And we have one. Again, this it says rotation's bad, so it's worth grabbing these guys. Yeah.
We were going to talk about some Cubs hitters anyway because we know the Cubs are running hot, but the Cubs also get a nice schedule coming up. Again, we're starting here. We're starting this like from Monday on. So they're not necessarily guys you would pick up this weekend, although some of them are hitting the ball really well. But the Cubs get the Dodgers, not great. But then they go at Colorado versus Oakland versus Washington, at Philadelphia, which is a decent pitching staff but a hitter-friendly park, and then end against the Reds. You had some Cubs hitters that you thought were interested in adding.
Yeah, major. I think PCA right now is taking the fantasy world by storm. You mentioned it in our live stream that we did on Tuesday. He's one of the best players in the player rater over the last 2 weeks of play. Stolen bases, runs scored, finally hitting for average. He seems to have covered up a hole that was up and away in the strike zone. He's been hitting for more power, more contact now, and it seems like pitchers need to find a new way to approach him. Miguel Amaya is another guy we talked about on Tuesday who while both him and PCA are still trapped in the bottom of the Cubs lineup, they're turning it over so well that they're both getting on base, scoring runs. Amaya's hit for more power than he has. And I think someone else not to forget, I think sometimes we forget about like guys who could have been dropped in your average 10, 12 team leagues. Dansby Swanson. Over his last 30 days, 4 homers, 21 runs scored, 20 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, and 872 OPS after a miserable, horrible first 4 months of the season. Can't undersell how bad Dansby was. But right now, if you take away these 30 days right now, the fact that he's running more is super relevant. I think this whole Cubs team has finally turned the leaf and running more too, because there's another guy I want to mention quickly. He's Nico Horner. For some reason, stopped being aggressive on the base paths early in the year when everyone wanted him to be. But he has attempted 5 stolen bases in his last 10 games alone, been successful in 4 of those. So if you see a Dansby or a Nico on your waiver wire, 10 or 12 team league, you need steals or run scored. I think both of them are good sources of that right now, despite still being in the bottom of the lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about this a little bit on the Q&A yesterday, but the Miguel Amaya thing, that the reason why we like, recommending him, even though he's still, in like maybe he catches 2/3 of the games for the Cubs, but it's connected to a clear swing change. He changed his swing at the beginning of June. He got rid of a leg kick that he had been using for a while. So that mechanical shift, then he goes on a hot streak. Like those things can be tied together a little more than just, hey, this is a dude on a hot streak and it's going to, wind down. Yes, he may not hit 320 like he was in August, but he could still be a very useful player for you. I think he has moved on to the 1 catcher radar, should certainly be rostered in all 2 catcher formats, but is worth looking at. There's a catcher in particular later on who we talk about it has a bad schedule and also has been struggling. I think you can make the swap just 1 for 1. So we'll get to that in a second. But the Braves are another team with a really good schedule upcoming. They get the Reds, and after the Reds, they do get the Dodgers again. Again, Dodgers pitching staff generally good, but there's a lot of question marks there right now. After that, the Braves go to Cincinnati again, and then they go to Miami. So a pretty solid stretch for the Braves. A lot of Braves hitters are rostered in over 50% of formats, so they can't really be picked up. But I wanted to highlight a few of them here. And they're guys who just picked up off the scrap heap. The Braves, turn them around and do some solid production out of them. But from August 1st on, so since he has been a member of the Braves, Ramon Laureano is hitting 326 in 29 games. He has 5 home runs, 12 runs scored, 11 RBIs, 3 steals. He's hitting towards the middle of the lineup. And so, yeah, Ramon Laureano, he has been a great pickup.
No, it's a 333 average over his last 30 games. It's kind of remarkable what's happened. He's totally usurped Jared Kelenic as an opposite platoon guy for that starting spot, and he seems to have become weirdly an emotional leader in this Braves team, which it feels like acid coming out of my mouth because I hate all of that, but he's hitting too well right now to ignore in fantasy.
Yeah, and even Gio Urshela, 12 games with the Braves, hitting 318 in 12 games. He has only 2 runs scored and 4 RBIs because he's hitting at the bottom of the lineup. But the Braves lineup is good. And if Urshela is going to keep hitting 318, you have to assume those counting stats are going to go up a little bit. And so I like him as a possible add. And then another low rostered guy. I mean, listen, Orlando Arcia has 6 home runs in his last 30 games. I don't really understand. I don't know how, how consistent that will be, how much he'll keep that going. But yeah, I mean, you got to use him while you can, I think.
Yeah, besides the home runs, it's been quite bad everywhere else. And in that stretch, he had his first multi-home run game in 5 years, about a week and a half ago, which is really funny, since 2019, which shouldn't even count anyway, but he's playing every single day. And that has to be worth something this time of year.
Yeah, it does. The last offense with a good schedule has fewer options for streaming, but we just want to mention them. It's the Pittsburgh Pirates. They get Miami. They get Kansas City. The Kansas City starters are starting to struggle a little bit. Reagan still looks good, but Lugo has taken a step back. Lorenzen's hurt. Then they get the Cardinals, and then they go to Cincinnati. Right now, the Pirates hitters who are playing well, who are under rostered. It's Jared Triolo, and it's Rowdy Tellez. Deeper formats, Tellez is going to sit against lefties. Triolo has been playing every day since the team moved O'Neal Cruz to center field. Are you interested in either of those guys? Or are you just it's cool that the Pirates have a good schedule, but I'm not going to do anything about it?
Absolutely not. I'll even find the pitchers that are pitching against them because this lineup stinks. It's terrible right now. Besides for O'Neal Cruz. O'Neal Cruz is amazing. And Brian Reynolds still having a good year. But, oh, man, the rest of these guys, there's not much to cheer about.
Okay. So, super deep formats,
Yeah.
NL only formats.
NL only, yeah.
We'll go with that. You also wanted to highlight
two guys,
a particular team just for a short series.
Oh, yeah. So I basically, as we're doing schedule stuff here, it's anyone that's playing the White Sox. I'll find a way to give them an edge of someone else. And I think I want to highlight a few guys on the A's right now who two are hitting really well. One is not, but they have a series against the White Sox next week. So I think it's worth. Seth Brown has come back and been very hot over the last week or two. JJ Bleday, his entire second half, his entire season, he's someone who's emerged kind of tremendously from the Athletics team this year. Someone who looks like he can play center field. His OPS for the season is approaching 800, 20 homers. Like he's been a real mainstay, truly an MVP in deep leagues. I think he's played every single game but 2 this year for the Oakland Athletics, and he's been great. And then just someone who can get hot, can steal a base, can hit a home run. Zach Geloff, just you're playing the White Sox, good things can happen for you, and I think it's worth the good things maybe happening for these 3 guys.
Agreed. You also had some hot hitters who were just hitting the ball well that you wanted to point out.
Yeah, 2 guys who I think were most likely dropped in almost every single 10, 12-team league as the season began and got going even to the second half, who now suddenly are blazing hot and can have really, really good Septembers to help you. One is Lars Nootbaar. Another one, similar to Dansby, I mentioned before, miserable for 3 months this year with an injury. But over 3 weeks, he has a 280, 349, 440 triple slash and 11% barrel rate. And another guy who's come back with a vengeance and been blazing hot after a bad first week off the IL, Josh Jung. Has a hit in 16 and 19 games. Half of those are multi-hit efforts with 3 homers and 3 steals over that same stretch. So he's getting everyday playing time. He's hitting, I think, 4th or 5th every single day in the Rangers lineup. He's finding his way right now. And these are 2 guys, Nootbaar and Jung, who we were excited about early in the season. Yeah. So think about why you were excited about them now. And now seeing that they're hitting well, playing every day. Nootbaar's also up to about 5th in the Cardinals lineup every single day. So good guys to keep on your radar if you just want some all-around players to put in your lineup next few weeks.
I will admit to overreacting on Jung because when he came back, their power wasn't there. And given the nature of his injury with the hamate bone, the wrist, all that stuff, I kind of thought, okay, maybe we're not going to get the power this year. And if we're not going to get the power, why is he on my roster?
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because obviously he's been really good and I've missed a little bit of this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about schedules to avoid. We got 4 teams who have tough schedules. And the question is just, are we avoiding these guys or not? Do we actually want to cut any of these hitters? The Angels don't have a lot of hitters we roster, but they get the Twins, the Astros, the White Sox, which is okay. We can play them there, but then they get the Astros again. So 3 of the 4 series is starting Monday are not good for the Angels. Logan O'Hoppe is rostered in 65% of leagues. Zach Neto is rostered in 68. Taylor Ward is rostered in 53. And I'm just curious if you're willing to cut bait on any of these guys.
Probably not. There's enough with all of their profiles I think is good. Taylor Ward especially has just come out and vocally said, I can still hit good pitching the last few weeks. So I give him the credit because in a lot of these instances, he actually has hit the good pitching. So hats off to Taylor Ward for
Bowden Francis is not good pitching though.
Yeah, not good pitching. I think also the same thing about Gausman, who also think probably is still good pitching. But hats off to Taylor Ward for talking his game and backing it up. Neto, just too many homers and steals there. He has trended down a bit after his really hot July and August, but never know what's going on there. And O'Hoppe, if you're one catcher, maybe you can find another guy there. Like we talked about Amaya before.
Yes.
Yeah, but 2 catchers is still just too much there to stop.
Yeah, O'Hoppe has been pretty bad over the last month that I'm willing to make the move to Amaya. But yes, in 2 catcher formats, I could leave him. But yeah, I think O'Hoppe was the guy I was alluding to earlier when I said I think there's a catcher who's rostered in too many 1 catcher leagues, unless 65% of those people are all in 2 catcher formats. Mm-hmm. Listen, the Phillies have a great lineup. We probably wouldn't want to drop any of these guys, but they get the Rays, the Mets, the Brewers, and the Mets. All of those teams are in the top 10 in a lot of pitching categories over the last month. I mean, the Mets, they're running hot right now. Their pitchers have been pitching well.
Baby.
I don't think you're dropping many of the Phillies hitters, but I just wanted to point out 2 guys who were struggling of late. And with the tougher schedule, and the struggles recently of Bryson Stott and Alec Bohm, are you concerned about either of those guys, or just like good lineup, good team? I don't care what the pitching matchups are like.
Yeah, Stott is the guy. It's hard to even roster Bryson Stott right now. The stolen base are keeping him fantasy relevant, but since the All-Star break, we're looking at a 250 hitter with 7 steals, 4 homers. It's a 690 OPS. It's not a guy that is a real productive player day in and day out. He had that hot April. I think a lot of people clung to that. That April didn't even wind up being that hot at the end of the day. It's just that it's been overall not a very good season for Stott. There hasn't really been a step taken. His approach seems to wax and wane with wanting to go for power, then wanting to go for contact, not really finding a semblance there. He's going to wind up with 35 steals and about 12 homers, which I guess in a vacuum is a fine season for a back end middle infielder, but he's not someone that if you could find a better option than Bryson Stott, it's probably a good time to do it. But the Phillies do still have a lot of home games, and home games will always help a guy like Bryson Stott.
Sure. If you could have made the swap like 2 weeks ago, grabbed Dansby Swanson and moved on from Stott, that would have been a decent move. Or Nico. The Guardians. The Guardians have a great first game next week against the White Sox. We talked about that. But then the next 2 series are the Rays and the Twins. Those are top 5 pitching staffs over the last month of the season. There are some Guardians that are struggling. Stephen Kwan rostered in 89% of leagues. He is the 592nd ranked player over the last month in Yahoo formats, hitting 173 with just 2 steals over that time. We have talked about Lane Thomas's struggles since coming to the Guardians. Andres Jimenez is stealing bases, and so that's important. He's hitting just 250 over the last month, but he has 9 steals. Are you concerned? Are you willing to drop any of these 3 guys with the series is against the Rays and the Twins coming up?
Probably not. I mean, Kwan's just the guy because the trend down has been so bad, but you just hope you can still get that 1 week where he scores like 6 or 7 runs and hits the 400 again, like we saw. But the White Sox series is good enough. And if that Tampa series was in Tampa Bay, where it's much harder to hit than if that series at home against Cleveland, I'd say maybe. But the Tampa rotation is not. It's still not terrifying to me right now. Like Pepio is still hot and cold. Taj Bradley has been running ice cold. They're using a bullpen.
Drop him. Drop Taj Bradley.
Yes, drop Taj Bradley. So bad. Who it's been really bad. It's just all fell apart. But and then they're using a bullpen game 1 day a week now too. Is there? I'm not avoiding Tampa Bay. I'm not focusing on them either. But I think that these hitters, especially with Jimenez, he's moved up to second in the order with some regularity. So I think there's still enough here to keep these guys going, and everyone is still running. They're still stealing a lot of bases, at least attempting it. So it's worth having for that reason.
Yeah, and we should note that Lane Thomas has been much better over the last 2 weeks, hitting 286 with 6 runs scored, 5 RBIs, 3 steals over the last 2 weeks. And he's kind of like bringing that value back. We talked about what Manzardo's doing, so maybe this lineup gets a little bit deeper, and that helps the counting stats of guys like Kwan, who you talked about aren't scoring as many runs as we want. So I would hold on these guys, but
especially against the White Sox.
Thomas is probably the most vulnerable, but he's been playing well of late. The last one, the San Diego Padres. They get the Mariners. We know how good that pitching staff is. They got the Giants, solid, not great though. They get the Astros, who have the number 1 pitching staff in baseball by ERA since August 1st. Then they got the White Sox. So 2 really bad matchups, 1 kind of bad matchup, 1 great matchup. The 3 names I'm putting on here are Jurickson Profar, who's rostered in 91% of leagues, Xander Bogaerts, rostered in 87% of leagues, and Jake Cronenworth, rostered in 77% of leagues. I wanted just to point out to you that over the last month, Jurickson Profar is hitting 194. He has 16 runs scored, and he has 4 stolen bases. So the overall fantasy numbers, he's the 287th ranked player over the last month. But that 280 batting average you're seeing, if you're looking at his stats for like the full year, he hasn't been that guy for like 6 weeks now. Profar. 91% of leagues feels high to me.
Yeah. Also, I don't think he has an extra base hit since he went deep off of Jose Budo to tie the game against the Mets a few weeks ago, which twists the knife in me a little bit more. But still, you're still seeing a lot of contact with Profar. You're still seeing him hit high in this lineup. He got an off day on Monday, but with Tatis back, so it's gonna be interesting to see how they shuffle this outfield. But most likely it's just David Peralta who hits the bench, which makes sense. He's kind of cooled off after his hot month, but now it makes sense that we'd be out there. Cronenworth's interesting too, because I think he has the beginning of the year was so good. The power seems so real. Then the middle is bad. Now he's been swinging a bit of a better bat, but Donovan Solano has gotten some playing time over him, especially against the lefties, because Donnie Barrels just eats lefties alive. He always has, and he always will. It's a weird lineup right now, and I wonder if we've seen Luis Reyes see some playing time of late. Bogarts is too good right now. I think he's hitting well, and they kind of have to play him. But it's going to be an interesting mix. I tend to hold Profar, definitely hold Bogarts. Maybe if I have to drop someone is Cronenworth, but I would definitely keep an eye on these next few weeks just to get a schedule thing. Because against the lefties, it looks like Donovan Solano's going to get that playing time and probably rise to first base too. But he's the one who's the most risk of losing a roster spot in your own fantasy team, I'd say.
Sure. Just for the record, I mean, Bogarts over the last month, the 290th ranked player in Yahoo formats, hitting 240. He's hitting just 205 over the last 2 weeks, but 240, 10 runs scored, 11 RBIs, 4 steals. I believe three of them came in one game. But the steals are kind of propping up the value here a little bit. We talked about Zach Neto's struggles, but Zach Neto also has 4 steals in the last 2 weeks, 6 in the last month. His stats are better than Bogarts' over the last month. I don't know. Like I'm not actively looking to drop Xander Bogarts, but if like Dansby Swanson is still available in my league, I would make that switch. I just think like look at some of the hot middle infielders, the guys who are playing really well. Like Swanson is 75% rostered in Yahoo formats, which means there are 25% of leagues, in Yahoo, where Dansby Swanson is out there because of how bad the beginning of his year was. He's the 15th ranked player over the last month. Like swapping Dansby Swanson in for Xander Bogarts is not an issue for me. And if you're like, oh, well, I know Dansby Swanson's playing really well, or I know, Nico Horner's 91% rostered, so he maybe doesn't qualify, but I know Nico's playing really well. I don't have a place for him. If that's Xander Bogarts, I think you do have a place for him.
And I think that it's like you mentioned before with Josh Jung and it didn't seem like the power came back, but now it has. The Bogarts shoulder injury was incredibly serious, and we haven't really seen the return to prominence that you would have hoped for him. So maybe that is just someone where you have to take that. I did that horrible thing where I had the name in my head rather than what's actually going on in the real world. It's like I can't drop Xander Bogarts, but maybe you just have to cut loose and see what happens there.
Yeah, I think that is the goal of what we're trying to do is to we got to make those hard calls at some point. We're going to tell you what hard calls to make with your pitching staff, but before we do that, fantasy football season just got $1 million better. Create or join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the $1 million NBC sweepstakes, plus earn extra entries to win when players on your fantasy roster score a touchdown during an opening weekend game on NBC or Peacock. Download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or go to NBCsports.com/fantasy million to learn more. Obviously, there are still days before the NFL season starts, and you can do your own leagues, up until kickoff, right? There's lots of time. So make sure you take advantage of that. We're going to go quickly on these pitchers because we want to make sure that we give you as many names as possible. So we're just going to I will give James the pitchers and the matchups that we have for them currently. And James, you can give me your opinion on just whether you'd roster this player or not, whether you'd pick up this pitcher right now or not. And just a disclaimer at the top, these are the current pitching matchups based on the RotoWire probable pitchers on Wednesday afternoon. This could change by Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon. So we're just going to give you the best advice we can right now based on what the matchups are. David Peterson is on fire and still under 50% rostered. He gets the Blue Jays and Nationals next. You have to add him, yes?
Have to. He got a big hip procedure in the offseason. He has said that it's helped him with his stamina. He says it's helped him with his command. Both of those things have held dramatically true this season. He's holding more velocity through starts. He doesn't have that much to begin with, so holding is really important. And he's been pinpoint with his sinker, his fastball, his changeup, his slider, his curveball. It's all coming together for Peterson somehow in some way.
Yeah. Got to add him if you got him there. Ben Lively, also 40% rostered, gets the White Sox, the Rays, and the Cardinals. So even if you're not sold on the Cardinals start, the next 2 starts with the White Sox and Rays are locked in, like must add. I think you kind of must add Lively, even in 12-team leagues, for those 2 starts.
Yeah, I believe that's also a 2-start week. So whatever we say about Lively, it's just those 2 starts are better. The Rays lineup, you wouldn't probably think it if you're just casually paying attention this year, it's so bad right now. It's
terrible.
Disgustingly bad. It's amazing sometimes they get 5 hits in a game. Their lineup stinks.
Yes, it does. It's sad because we like to think of the Rays as a feisty offense, and they are not.
Yeah, no.
We talked about this Rangers rotation a little bit, and we talked about how it's hurting our boy Cody. But Andrew Heaney's next 4 starts are Angels, Mariners, Mariners, Angels. And again, that could change with the Rangers mixing things up, but I don't know that there's a starting pitcher in baseball who has a better next 4 games than Andrew Heaney from a schedule perspective.
No, and Andrew Heaney's been sneaky on fire through the second half of the season. 3.24 ERA in August with 1.08 WHIP, more than the strikeout per inning. He does this all the time, so everything's with a grain of salt with Andrew Heaney. And there's only that hot month went, there's only been 1 quality start for Andrew Heaney since the end of June. So you're probably not going to get length. You got to get lucky, probably to get a win. And this schedule could shake up because of the injuries coming back, deGrom and stuff. But it's worth a shot because those matchups are unbelievably good.
Yes, great. Frankie Montas, I was never a huge Montas fan. He's been really good since coming to the Brewers and relying heavily on the fastball. He gets the Rockies at home, so not in Coors, and then the Giants. Those are also 2 pretty good matchups for a guy who's on a good team and pitching well right now.
And the Brewers always do this. They're so good at this little game planning stuff, especially with new pitchers they acquire. They've had Montas throw more cutters. They've had him kind of manipulating his fastball usage more, like you said. It's just seeing something tangible with Montas, like he changed teams, he changed his pitch mix, and he's pitching better. That'll let me trust a guy more in this short window kind of situation.
Yeah, I enjoy Montas with these 2 starts. I don't want to get too locked in. I think the Giant start is not something I must do, but it's something I could do. I can't believe I'm even mentioning the next name. Patrick Corbin is 15% rostered, and most of that is because he got the Miami Marlins last night and did fine. He just missed a quality start by 1 out, but he was fine. He gets the Pirates this weekend, and then he gets the Marlins again next week. Are we doing this? Are we the year 2024? We're gonna dive in on Patrick Corbin again?
I'm putting my hand up. I did it in many leagues this week, and I even faced him in a few. So it seemed like he was active everywhere. And I got to give credit to our mutual friend, Nick Pollock, for even in March saying that he liked Corbin relative to where he was being valued in the fantasy baseball space because of this new color that he's throwing hard. It's a pitch that's in between. We hear pitching coach talk about that a lot. Movement velocity in between the sinker and his slider. And it's good. And those matchups are too good to ignore. I think Corbin's a guy that's good enough to beat a really bad lineup.
Yeah, and I'm pulling it up on StatCast right now because I wanted to make sure my numbers were right. But Corbin has been leaning into the cutter even more, since the summer started, and going kind of sinker cutter a lot in September, and that's been useful for him. He's also gone back to the curveball a little more and kind of abandoned the 4-seam fastball. But you got some pitch mix changes which have led to good results, good matchups. Yeah, I think we're doing it with Patrick Corbin for sure. What about the 2 rookies in Minnesota? David Festa 17% rostered, Zebby Matthews 14% rostered. Festa has pitched really well of late. He gets the Angels next week, which we like. Then he gets the Guardians. Zebby gets the Royals. He gets the Reds at home. So the Reds are on the road. They're much worse on the road. He gets the Guardians. Then he gets Miami. So Zebby's kind of an up and down. Is Festa I'll start him versus the Angels and then I'll move on?
I'm all in on Festa right now. I'm so in love with the way he can mix his slider and changeup. His changeup moves so much that he is not afraid to throw it against righties, and he's also leaned more into the slider, which is definitely his best pitch over his last few starts. With still a good fastball is totally fine. Rocco Baldelli has started to trust him more deeper into games. I shout out New Jersey, shout out Seton Hall for David Festa right there. Grew up in the same county, which is kind of hilarious. It's at the same time, but I really like Festa. I like that pitch mix. And I think Zebby, we saw a little bit over the weekend that it's kind of feast or famine with him because he's not missing as many bats right now with his pitch mix being very cutter heavy. So he's a little more susceptible to blow ups. I'm very scared that at Casey start for Zebby, but the other ones, I'm not afraid of Cleveland's offense really at all. And I think these are guys to be on radars going forward.
I agree, and I'm with you on. I lean more towards to Festa as well. We talked about Cade Povich a little bit at the start. Cade Povich 6% rostered right now. He gets Boston in Fenway, which is a little bit dangerous. I know you mentioned as you put on the sheet that Boston has the highest strikeout rate in baseball against lefties. Boston's offense has really been struggling. Boston's offense in Fenway is pretty good, but then Povich also gets the Tigers and then the Tigers. So even if you wanted to skip the Boston start, Tigers and Tigers is pretty good. I feel like Cade Povich is back on the radar.
It's weird because it's not really anything he's done differently, but he's striking more guys out. He's walking fewer hitters. I had him in too many lineups for the single start against the White Sox last night, and he rewarded me with 10 strikeouts in 7 and 3rd innings. And the Boston thing is kind of real against lefties because Devers definitely still has a pretty significant platoon split. They wind up hitting Romy Gonzalez. I think it was last night, 4th or 5th against David Peterson. As David Peterson had a career high 11 strikeouts. So in Fenway makes that scarier. But if you're staring at a 2-start week for Cade Povich, and the second one's going to be in Detroit, you're going to think long and hard about that Boston start. And the fact that they have one of the worst offenses in baseball this year against left-handed pitching, I don't know, it's put up or shut up time. But that might be one you just have to squeeze tight for and like close your eyes and look at the box score at 11 p.m. and hope something could happen.
Yeah, and again, you're getting a decent chance at a win, which matters. We're getting into the nitty-gritty here. These are guys that are rostered in like 2%. But Jack Kakanowitz, I think, is how it pronounces for the Angels, and Griffin Canning for the Angels. They get the Twins next week, which is not great, but not awful. And then they both get White Sox to wrap it up. I've been burned by Griffin Canning in the past. I'm weirdly leaning Kakanowitz, and Nick Pollock, as you mentioned, has kind of like talked me into that because he mentioned that he's so sinker ball heavy. So you're not going to get a lot of strikeouts, but you're likely against the White Sox in particular that it's far more likely that he goes 6 or 7 innings, maybe gives up 1 or 2 runs, and is in a good position for even a win against the White Sox because even the Angels are better than the White Sox, right? Rather than Canning, who throws more pitches because he goes for more strikeouts. He tries to lean on that slider. And so there's a chance that Canning only goes like 5, but both of them have great matchups and are worth looking into.
Kakanowitz really has even gone more sinker heavy of late. His first few starts in the majors, he was around 50% sinker with a lot of curveballs and changeups. And now it's just 80% sinkers. He just goes out there, throws a 96, 97 mile an hour sinker and just dares people to hit it. He's getting a 60% ground ball rate. Like I don't trust this against most teams in Major League Baseball, but against this White Sox lineup, I would weirdly be very willing to just have him in the lineup and hope you get that win. Yeah,
I agree with that. Last one, and then we'll get to some cuts so we can wrap it up here. Former Mets prospect, JT Ginn, with the Athletics now, looked pretty good in his start last night. He gets the Tigers and the White Sox, which is why I'm like, I can't believe I didn't really think that we are going to go here. When he was called up, the expectation was that he was just going to be like out of the bullpen. But they've now kind of said that they're going to give him starts rather than Joe Boyle, right? The Joe Boyle ship sailed. Are you willing to bank on this because of those 2 poor offenses?
Against the White Sox, for sure. Against the Tigers, I'll say maybe. Ginn was actually traded from the Mets to the A's for Chris Bassett. And he's a long time ago. The Mets also do this weird thing where I think it's 9 of 10 drafts they've taken a Mississippi State Bulldog, which is unbelievable. And Ginn was part of that mix, but he's throwing 95 mile an hour sinker, mixing in a pretty solid bullet slider and a changeup that's a decent pitch that he's using a lot against the lefties. It's not the worst approach right now, and it's someone that can, again, definitely beat the White Sox, but you'll probably hold your breath against the Tigers, which says a lot about where Ginn is. But it's not, if it was any other team, I would say definitely not. But those are 2 where it's like, why not?
Yeah, look, yesterday against the Mariners, 6 innings, 3 runs allowed, 7 strikeouts. And I think the Mariners offense, as bad as it is probably better than the Tigers offense. So I'm personally willing to do it in deeper formats. I'm willing to do it again for both these offenses.
Yeah.
All right, quick. I'm going to give you pitchers and their next few matchups, and you tell me if you would cut them or not. These are all players who are rostered in over 50% of leagues, so they are not streamers. So the idea is, are we just going to cut these pitchers now to add any of the streamers we were talking about before?
Yeah.
Eduardo Rodriguez gets Houston, Milwaukee, and at Colorado.
Cut.
Yes, easy cut. Brandon Pfaadt gets Houston, Milwaukee, and then Milwaukee again.
Hold. I'll hold Fott. Slight
I'll
hold.
cut. I'll cut in 12. I'll hold in 15.
I would take Montes. Would you take Montes over Fott?
I've always had some concerns about Fott against lefties. And I guess the Brewers don't have without Yelich don't have a lefty that like really concerns me. So maybe I'll amend mine to
Jake
hold
Bowers?
for Fott. Yes, I'm so scared of Jake Bowers. I can't start a pitcher against him. Kutter Crawford at Baltimore versus the Yankees versus Minnesota.
Recency bias looked so good against the Mets last night. I'll lean slight hold for Kutter Crawford, but I think that it's similar with that Montes line. Like that's probably the spot where it's like, am I really dropping these guys? I think I probably drop Crawford for Lively in the 2-start week, maybe for Heaney, but that's a 1-start week. Then you have if you're getting a really good 2-starter next week, but I think Crawford does have a 2-start week next week, but much worse matchups.
But, yes,
yeah. Just it's that is one where you think about. But the Kutter looked so good last night. It really did. It looked awesome. He kept the Mets lineup down.
I know. If I need the spot, I'm happy to cut Kutter Crawford because I don't see starting him against Baltimore and the Yankees. If I'm in a place where I can hold him, fine. But I think we can potentially move on. Tobias Myers has a start against the Rockies at home, which is great. But then he faces the Diamondbacks and Phillies. So after that Rockies start, are you moving on from Tobias Myers?
Yeah, I'm moving on from Tobias Myers. I like Tobias Myers, but it's still just not an approach I tremendously trust right now, especially against good offenses.
Yeah, not against the Diamondbacks and Phillies. So take the Rockies start, thank Tobias Myers for his service, and then move on. I think I'm doing the same thing with Luis Severino. He gets the Reds at home. And as we talked about, the Reds away from Great American Ballpark are a different offense. But then he gets the Phillies twice and then the Braves to end the season. I'm cutting Severino after the Reds start.
One thing I'll say about Severino is that he gave an interview where he said in the middle of the season, he was focused more on pitching to contact because how beleaguered the Mets staff was. And that in doing that, he went hard away from his sweeper because he was like, I can't worry about strikeouts. I need to stay in these games as long as I can. Since then, he's gone back to a sweeper. And I did a split of his season when he throws a sweeper at least 15% of the time and when he throws it fewer than 15% of the time. When he throws a sweeper at least 15% of the time, which now he's done for 5 straight starts since he gave this interview and said he was in there for strikeouts again. He's a guy who's almost 20% strikeout minus walk rate and ERA about 3.5. So with that pitch mix that he does, I know the Phillies have a lot of lefties, so those are the 2 matchups that really scare me. But I might hold on to him because a 2-start week, 1 Philly, 1 Atlanta. I don't think it's because Atlanta's not. This isn't the scariest lineup in the world right now. It's not even close to it. I think he's done enough this year, and he's still throwing hard. He's maintaining the velocity, especially with home starts because they feel such a great place to pitch. He's someone I'm a little more willing to hold on to.
Fair. That Atlanta start 3 starts from now, so it's possible Albie's back in the lineup for then. So just
another lefty. Yeah.
Robbie Ray is on the IL. It comes off the IL. If he comes off the IL, if he comes off the IL in time, we don't even know. He'll get the Brewers and the Padres. Are you holding?
I think it has to be a drop. You'll know what you're going to get, and if you get those matchups, it's probably not worthwhile. Milwaukee crushes left-handed pitchers too.
Tough but fair.
Yeah.
Tough but fair. Last 2, they're Tampa Bay Rays teammates. Shane Baz gets the Orioles, the Guardians, and the Red Sox. The Red Sox at home, not in Fenway. And then he gets Ryan Pepio gets the Orioles, the Guardians, and the Blue Jays.
I want to believe in Pepio so badly, but there's some starts where he goes out there and it looks like he just doesn't know where the ball's going still and can't figure out a slider.
I'm having my technical issues. Are you cutting either of Shane Baz or Ryan Pepio?
Cut Pepio, keep Baz. Tight, though. I might keep Pepio. Those matchups aren't after Baltimore. It's not really that bad, but he's looked bad. It's hard. Do I have you?
Yeah. I hear you on that. I heard what you said. I'm having some audio issues, which is a perfect time to wrap up this podcast. I don't know what's happening here, but I will get with it on Verizon. So we'll be back with you again next week for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I am Eric Samulski. You can find me on Twitter at SamskiNYC, and James is on Twitter at James_Schiano, SCHIANO. Good luck in your leagues this week, and we'll get you back next week for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.